St. Michael's birthday today. Happy birthday, Michael.
Happy birthday.
That's not an ad.
Oh.
No, we can't. It's a market recording.
I don't even know what we did on
You don't know what we did on Friday. Good thing it's going on. Yeah, we can. If you want to go over Dr. Elder intervention, watch a YouTube video for class on Friday. All right, major types of government. We've talked about 2 autocracies and democracies. 2 types of autocracies we have discussed: totalitarian dictatorships and monarchies. Both usually have complete power and pass their power through inheritance or some sort of force, whether it's military or police or social position. We also talked about, I guess we talked about 3 of them. Oligarchy. Small group of people have all the power. We talked about how the Kardashians use their social position to develop power, right? And Osama bin Laden used his wealth, claim that rule is by the people, and they can do this by conducting elections that are already fixed, like North Korea, right? We talked about the North Korean voting results, and that 100% of their population showed up to vote, and that 100% of them all voted for Kim Jong-un. Okay? Makes sense, right? Democracy. People hold the sovereign power. We talked about direct democracy and representative democracy. Which one do we have here in the United States? We have one of the 2, thank you, but which one of the 2? We do not have direct democracy in the United States. Okay. Direct democracy, or AKA pure democracy, only exists in extremely small populated areas because it requires its citizens to act as Congress would. If you have a ton of people, like the United States does, we need to elect people to represent us. Otherwise, our Congress would be made up of all 300 million of us rather than 538 during Congress now. All right? And then, how far do we get in here?
Pre-election.
Pre-elections, and then we got to there, didn't we? They vote freely by secret ballot. And what was the advice I gave you if someone were to offer you a bunch of money to vote for them? Take the money and vote for whoever you want anyways, because it's a secret. You don't have to tell anybody. All right? And pro tip, don't ask me who I voted for, because I'm never going to tell you. All right? And you're not supposed to ask people who they voted for. It's like asking someone how much they weigh. Just not something you do. Okay? So if somebody wants to offer their opinion, by all means, feel free to listen. Unless they offer it, avoid it. All right? Anybody watching the debates coming up? We have a vice presidential debate coming up soon as well. Yeah, the vice presidential debate will be 2 people you've never heard of before. Can anyone name either of the vice presidential candidates right now? Joe Biden is the vice president. Probably not. All right? That's how exciting the vice presidential election, or the vice presidential candidacy, I should say, has been, versus the presidential candidacy, which you know everything about each of them, their personal and professional lives for the last 40 years. What? One of them from Ohio?
Is it Pitts? Isn't that Trump?
Pitts, yes, one of them. And Kaine, Kaine, is Hillary's. All right, competing political parties. So political parties that compete. Pretty crazy, huh? In the United States, we have a 2-party system. They compete against each other for power. What are those 2 parties? Republican and Democrat. Okay, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Does anyone know the third oldest political party in the United States? The Communist Party of the United States is the third oldest current party. The Whig Party was pretty long run, so was the Democratic Republic Party. Yes, there used to be one party. All right, anybody know any of the other major political parties we had? First two political parties we had were something you definitely studied before, but the Federalist Party and the Anti-Federalist Party. So competing political parties are important for democracy because these political parties represent people's views. However, we're going to do an activity very soon that is going to hopefully make you stop thinking of yourself as one or the other. You do not have to be a Republican or a Democrat. Meaning, if you think you're a Republican, you don't have to believe everything that the Republican Party believes. If you're a Democrat, you don't have to believe everything the Democratic Party believes. A lot of experts, although I'm not an expert, believe that political parties work like this. So this would be, let's do it this way. So conservative and liberal. And you fall somewhere on this spectrum. Do you see the words Republican or Democrat on here? Absolutely not. Okay? So I'm going to show you how to figure out where you fall on each issue and how to figure out which candidate you should vote for. Because if this was 0, we call this +1, and we call this -1. So let's say you're -8. You have another candidate that's -8. Guess what? Odds are not good that you are exactly in agreement. They could be very much against some of the things you believe in, even if they are the exact same number. Okay? Because this number is determined by a bunch of questions. You answer those questions, right? So if I were to give Tyler a 100-question test and give Bree a 100-question test, and they both got an 80%, what are the chances that they both miss the exact same questions? Probably not very good. That's what's happening here. Just because you got the same score doesn't mean you got the same questions right. So you need to pay attention to what your individual candidates believe so that they better match up. Because you could match up better with somebody that got 60%, because you got 60%, all 60% of their questions are what you answered. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Sure? Great. All right, and here's the definition of a political party. A group of individuals with broad common interests who organize to nominate candidates for office, win elections, conduct government, and determine public policy. Wow, that's long. Okay? But they do all of these things. But if you had to break it down to one definition that is much, much shorter than this, a similar group of individuals who organize to win elections and control government. Similar group of people who organize to win elections and control government. Does anybody know how many major political parties Great Britain has? 8. Close. 5. However, there are 2 monster parties, and then there are 3 slightly smaller parties. All right? And does everybody remember those 2 terms we talked about on Friday that I said would be a good idea to write down? They were not on this screen. We just talked about them. Majority. Did we talk about majority? And plurality. All right. So here's how it works in Great Britain. You don't vote for any candidates for Parliament. You vote for a political party. All right, so let's say these are the 5 major parties. Usually ends up being something like this and this. All right? Do either of these groups have a majority? No, they don't. So then what happens? What do we have? 58%. What's the last bit here? 55, 85, 93, 7%. So normally what happens is these parties who have a bunch of support have to get together with some of these parties. So who might the 30% group go after? Why do they go after D? Is that more than 50%? No. So B would probably go after C8 together. Because then that would give them a 2% majority. That makes sense? Versus these guys would end up with 48%. So A is likely to go for D in E. So most likely what's going to happen is B and C are going to hook up, and A and D are going to hook up, and they're going to fight for the support of the smallest population. They're going to fight for that 7%, because that's the difference between majority and just a plurality. So how many of you would have thought that the most important voting results on that board were E's? Probably nobody, right? But they are. That 7% is the most important in British politics. Here's a question that gets a lot of response normally. How many of you think that we should have more than 2 major political parties in the United States? I'm not sharing why you think that. You don't mind, or you don't want to? Okay. Anybody else think there should be more than 2 political parties? How many of you agree exactly with every single thing that one of these political parties puts out? There isn't a single thing you disagree with. So all of you probably should have raised your hands, right? You want a political party that more closely resembles what you believe. Like, for example, there's a fine line between Republican and Libertarian, correct? The difference is, what? Anybody know? I do know. Does anybody else know? Libertarians are very, very free-minded, meaning you have a ton of personal freedoms. They would legalize marijuana, something the Republican Party will not do. They would say abortion, whatever, do what you want. Because they're saying it's not our job. It's not the government's job to tell you what to do. The government's job to keep you safe from foreign attacks and make sure people don't corner markets. Remember not. That's it. Other than that, we'll shut up, stay out of your business. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. He is not. He is a very moderate Republican. He actually, and I'm not saying this to make anybody mad, it's just fact. He was a Republican back in the 70s, and then he was a Democrat through the early 80s to the mid-90s. And then he was a Republican from 96 to 98, and he was an independent from 99 to 2002. And then he was a Democrat from 2002 to 2010, and then has been a Republican from 2011 until now. So, I don't know, and that's why I don't really understand his diehard Republican following, because he's been a Democrat for 4 years and he's been a Republican. It is what it is. Do what you want. Vote for who you want. It's the best thing about democracy. Having the right to vote is a great right, isn't it? But you also have the right not to vote. And that's just as much of a right as voting. Many democracies have a multi-party system, while the United States has a 2-party system. Sorry, I got ahead of myself, started talking about it before I got up there. that's what we've been talking about. U.S. has a two-party system, which makes it very easy for us to get majorities versus other countries where it's very difficult. All right, any questions over this? The soil of democracy. What do you think I mean by the soil of democracy? Got a little deep on this one. It's basically what democracy is planted in. No, what do you thought that was funny? Thanks for the courtesy, Matt. Active citizen participation. This is extremely important because what would happen if not a single person showed up to vote on November 8th? Nobody would get reelected. So if citizens don't vote, our government would basically stand still or collapse. One of the two. Oh, would you say hopefully they collapse?
No, I said they probably would collapse.
They probably would collapse. Yeah, it's for those people that do want the government to collapse, be careful what you wish for.
No, I don't.
I'm not talking about you. For those of you that do, because some people do, be very careful because we have two things that no other country in the world has. Number one, we have the most stable government in history. By far, the most stable government. Because we have peacefully changed power since 1976, all the way until now, and we hope to pass power peacefully again. No other country has passed power peacefully that many times. Not one. Without it being an autocracy. Okay? And number two, we have the least restricted market in the world. Meaning of all the markets that exist throughout the globe, the United States government has the least amount of control over our economy than any other country would have over their economy. Okay? So it may seem like the government's got all the power, they tell you what to do, but believe me, if you go anywhere else, it will be much, much worse as far as government control goes. An example. A perfect example would be the United Kingdom. So a lot of people say, I'm moving to Europe, and pick your candidate gets elected, right? Doesn't matter. If you move to Europe, you are basically moving into a democratic socialist government. Healthcare is socialized and paid for through your tax dollars for everybody, no matter what. You do not get a choice. You have the same healthcare as the person next to you. Totally socialized. Number two, they have no written constitution, so you have no constitutional rights. Meaning they can ban all guns at any point in their ban. They're done. Or they could prevent people from speaking out against the government if they wanted to. Or they could institute slavery for people coming from Middle Eastern nations if they wanted to. They truly could, because there is no written constitution stopping them. Does that make sense? Same thing with Canada. Your tax rates are about, how many of you think your taxes are too high now? Right? Anybody have a job think your taxes are too high? Lowest income tax rates in the world, by far. Canada taxes about 70%. 70, meaning if you made $100,000 a year, you only make $30,000. Not a joke. Real thing. Because the government provides so many things for you. Prescription, healthcare, all kinds of different things. Right? In Canada, now, the housing market is different because they do have modified free enterprise systems, but the government, in that case, does own some property and can sell that property. Forces markets to do certain things. Like in Canada, they can force pharmaceutical companies to sell their goods at whatever price. And say, no, you're not allowed to sell it for that price. You have to sell it for this price. Whereas in the United States, like anybody here what happened with EpiPens?
Yeah.
So the cost of EpiPens increased like 900%, from $100 to about $900 overnight. Just the person that was the CEO increased the cost by that much. Can she do that? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because the government can't say no. Can't. All right, so the United States has to have active citizen participation to elect those individuals. Even if you don't like them, there's only so much that can be done. A lot of emphasis is placed on who the President of the United States is, but they have very, very, very little power to do anything that they say they're going to do. We even heard Trump or Clinton say they have a tax plan, how they're going to change taxes the way they're done. Yeah. Guess how much presidential power there is over taxes? None. None. They can't do anything about taxes. Not their job. Congress is the only person or people that can determine tax policy and change it. Favorable economy. Favorable economy. What do you think this means? Economy, right? That's money. People selling stuff, people buying stuff. What's a favorable economy? It works. It's good. Like, businesses can sell stuff, and people have enough money to buy that stuff so that they can continue making stuff. So people can continue buying stuff. Right? You have to have a favorable economy, or your citizens are going to be very upset. And one way to do this is through free enterprise. Free enterprise is not free market, although they usually go hand in hand. It is the opportunity to control one's economic decisions and make independent political decisions. So it means you are allowed to determine if you're going to start your own business. And you are allowed to determine how much your goods in your business cost. And people are allowed to decide whether your goods are too expensive and not buy them anymore. Does anybody know who the major wireless carriers are out there now? 4, right? Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile. Those are the 4 nationwide wireless carriers. Now, when cell phones started coming out pretty heavily, that was about 15 years ago or so. Anybody's parents have Nextels? Yeah. My grandma had the phone before the Nextel, and no internal memory. You had to remember every number you dialed, and it was like an insane amount of money a month to have to just make phone calls. But anyways, so cell phones have come a long way in 15 years, and now there are 4 major carriers. There used to be like 9 or 10. There was like Nextel and Alltel and Virgin Mobile used to have their own service. I don't think they do anymore. They merged with T-Mobile, right? So Singular was a big one. Didn't Orange do, right? AT&T bought Singular. T-Mobile bought Virgin. Verizon bought Alltel. Basically, they got smaller and smaller to where there's only 4 major ones now. Okay. Then a few years ago, AT&T and Sprint tried to merge. Okay. Obviously, they didn't. The reason they didn't is because of one of the very few instances when our government does get involved in the economy. If there's only 3 carriers, people have less options. Therefore, those 3 carriers can charge more money because you don't have anywhere else to go. So they wanted to promote competition. So if things cost too much, what do the consumers, or what should the consumers do? Stop buying. If it costs too much, stop buying. Because if demand goes down, guess what else goes down? Price. All right? And what's going to happen is For those of you that have ever seen one. If demand is here and supply is here, and all of a sudden demand goes here, and they can't stop supply soon enough, that price is going to fall a ton. And if demand never goes back up, supply is going to go down. And they're still going to have to lower the prices in order to sell goods. Okay? So the biggest power you have as a consumer is your money. If you don't like something, don't buy it. For example, there are a lot of people that are not buying hunting gear from Under Armour anymore. Because there was a woman that killed an animal, and they dropped her sponsorship because of how she killed it, I believe. I'm not exactly sure. But basically, the importance of the story is Under Armour dropped her sponsorship because she did this. So Under Armour's hunting sales have seen a 31% decrease in the last 3 months. And the last 3 months, for those of you that do hunt, know that those 3 months are the biggest hunting sale months of the year. Because hunting season started last month. So Under Armour is figuring out what they're going to do. And they could potentially drop their entire hunting line and stop making it. Because people stop buying. Any golfers? Okay? I golf a lot. Which major golfing company, or sports company I should say, is going to stop making golf stuff? Nike. Nike's no longer going to make golf clubs, or golf balls, or anything other than, I believe, hats, shirts, like apparel type thing. They're not going to make gloves, putters, anything. Does anybody know why? People didn't like that they sponsored Tiger Woods. And since the Tiger Woods incident, since Tiger Woods sponsored Nike, their sales have steadily gone down and down and down and down. To the point where it's no longer profitable, so they don't make it anymore. Okay? So your power as a consumer, and especially in the free enterprise system where you can make your own decisions, is extremely important. So please do not underestimate your power as a consumer. States with stable economies are better able to handle democracy. So what that means is states, remember, countries, with economies where people are happy and they're stable and they're not always fluctuating, are better able to handle democracies than, say, communist nations, where their economy is their government. It is one and the same. So if their economy was not favorable, then their government's not favorable, then they're probably experiencing some sort of civil war. Widespread education. How many of you are required by law to be in this seat right here, right now? Every single one of you is required by law to be here. Okay? Oh, you don't want to get smarter? Guess what? Okay? So what happens if you don't show up to school? You become truant. And for those of you that don't know, I've probably said this before, but I want to make it very clear, this year, unexcused absence is a truancy absence, and you go to court. Right?
One of them?
One is truancy, immediately. You are not allowed to miss a day of school unless we know where you are, or you'll be truant. Just so you're aware before anything happens. Huh? Even if you're 18. Especially if you're 18, because then you're the one that goes to jail instead of your parents. Just drop out. Sure, go ahead. I mean, it's fine, I don't care. But if you're signed up to be here, you're not here, then yeah. It's true. But even if you are 18, which I hate to burst everybody's bubble. Everybody thinks they're 18 and they can just leave school and sign themselves out. Yeah, you can. However, to attend CTC, you sign a paper at the beginning of the year that says your parent or guardian is the one that's responsible for getting you here. You agreed to be here, and your parent or guardian is saying, I agree to make sure that you are. So even if you're 40, if you sign that piece of paper, you got to be here. So, heads up. Did you know that as of 2015, you can't work at McDonald's without a high school diploma unless you are in progress to getting it? Moral of the story. Get it home. Okay? Yeah, widespread education, you have to make sure your citizens can understand the huge issues in government. Remember, we're typing things under these ones where I don't have anything under them. Typing about widespread education. Right? Talked about this on Friday. There's nothing under it. You should be typing what we're saying, what we're talking about, what we're discussing. Widespread education, because the people need to be able to understand what they're voting for, who they're voting for, why it's important, and to be able to develop their own opinions. If they can't develop their own opinions and they're extremely dumb, then we move towards like third world countries and autocracy type government. We need a strong civil society. What's a strong civil society? Right? So you'll figure it out after I tell you this. We have military, correct? And anybody that's not military is a what? Civilian. Yeah. So, strong civilian society. So what does that mean? It means people are active. They do stuff. You have clubs. You have organizations. Right? Even here in school, we have Skills USA, FCCLA, and FFA, just here at CTC. Right? There are tons and tons of organizations that you can become a part of. And those strong civil or civilian societies promote democracy because these clubs let the government know what you believe. All right? And here's the definition of a civil society. Complex network of voluntary associations, economic groups, religious organizations, and many other independent groups, which means pretty much any group ever is a strong civil society. So youth groups, or communist political parties, or socialist political parties, or any political parties, voluntary associations like 4-H, right? Anybody involved in 4-H? Single greatest thing I ever did in my life was 4-H. Fantastic. Unbelievable. Got a ton of scholarships for school. I learned how to sew. I learned how to cook. I showed all kinds of animals, rabbits, chickens, goats, hogs, steer. I know how to hunt and shoot and cook that stuff after I'm done hunting it and shooting it. And it's absolutely the greatest thing I ever did. Plus, Tyler, what kind of preference do you take? So, do you have to interview with the judge for showmanship? Okay. Well, you probably never made it to the, have you made it to the second? Oh, okay. So that's why. So during showmanship, where if you express to the judge what you know about the animals, they are interviewing you. So you learn about interview skills that can get you a job at some point, because you're able to talk to a person who has a ton of knowledge and explain to them what you know so that they can offer you a job at some point. Right? 4-H, fantastic. Fantastic. Right. All right. Social consensus. This is where citizens all accept democratic values such as equality for all. So how many of you think that everyone should have equal access to everything? Please raise your hands. Everybody, please raise your hands. Please, get your hands in the air. Okay. All citizens, meaning everyone that is an American, should have equal access to all things. Meaning everybody should have equal access to education. Everyone should have equal access to voting. Everybody should have equal access to the opportunity to receive some sort of training or post-secondary education to get them the job that they desire. If you don't believe that, you're probably one of two things: racist or bigot. All right? Oh, bigot. Meaning you think you're better than certain other groups of people.
it.